We experience shadow basically by ignorance. That's what makes a shadow. It's something that we're not aware of, or we deny it either actively or subconsciously. Very early on, we learn this response to those things that aren't accepted, and we quickly start to put those into the hidden areas. Little by little, those behaviors that aren't acceptable get shoved into the shadows, and we create a subconscious warehouse, you might say, of things that aren't believed to be okay. And when I'm talking about shadow work, I'm talking about what we can do with it, which is bring light to it. And so the reality that we live in is the decision. We live in this decision of whether or not I'm going to bring light to that thing. So the block is our decision-making process of, do I bring light or do I not bring light? The who I will be without the block becomes a really important question. Because who would I be is really an unsettling feeling for some of us if we haven't explored that level of power, that level of pure being.
Hello and welcome to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginzburg, the host of the podcast, a yoga and meditation teacher and philosophy lover. Each week you will hear eye-opening interviews with the different teachers of the Yandara Yoga Institute, located in beautiful Baja, Mexico, along with other teachers that pass through here. This life-changing knowledge, shared through authentic, heartfelt communication, will help you live a happier, more fulfilled, and connected life. Let's dive in.
Hello, welcome back to Curious Ones podcast by Yandara. I'm Yael Ginzburg, and I have today the wonderful Christopher Perkins again, co-founder of Yandara, teacher of over 25 years. So today we're talking about the subject of shadows and blocks and unpacking all of that. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always nice to be here with you. So thank you for inviting me. And this topic, I think, is really important in the times we're living in, to understand how to relate to the world as we see it and understanding what we can do with that response.
Exactly. So thank you for facilitating all of this. You're the one that made it possible. I have to mention that. And let's dive in. So let's start by just explaining what is a shadow actually, different than what we know it to be.
So in this context, of course, we're talking about self-awareness and self-realization. So shadow work is just the process of bringing light to the parts that we deny or that we might not even acknowledge. So we experience shadow basically by ignorance. That's what makes a shadow. It's something that we're not aware of, or we deny it either actively or subconsciously. So the shadow work or the shadow concept is just simply humbly approaching ourselves with this understanding that we don't know actually what's running the show often. And we have a life to live that will show us what those shadows are.
And in what way do these shadows run the show? Why is it important for us to know what they are?
The shadow is part of our subconscious. Usually that's why it's referred to as a shadow. So if you've ever felt yourself get frustrated with someone's continuous behaviors, or felt like you've lost a bit of your center when it comes to a challenge, some kind of confrontation, usually it's with someone that you care about or someone that you trust and that you let yourself be open to, that's when the shadows start to function through our personality traits and through our reactions. So no part of us wants to be in the shadow. We are beings of light. This concept of shadow is really the result of us denying the natural self, which is completely honest, completely receptive to the light of reflective experience. And what I mean by that is it's working through our daily relationships. And so our interactions always will reflect what's happening in this shadow arena, you might say.
So by noticing what's happening in our interactions, which is actually a subject that we've covered a lot as a point of reference to like clue as to finding out what are those things that are hiding in the shadows or in our subconscious. By being aware and noticing what those are, we start to realize really the parts of ourselves that we hid from the world.
Exactly.
What makes us hide these parts of the world in the first place?
We're survivors. We're very adaptable, as most beings are. We figure out how to work in the environment that we find ourselves in. So pretty early on in life, I think we can track, just by watching the way kids respond to certain situations, we can track what things start to be hidden, what things become a secret based on what's accepted or not accepted. So we could think of the first shadows just being a response to a parent or a teacher giving us a negative response to a truth. Could be, my truth could be, I love sweet things. I love candy, and I'm going to eat some now. That could be the reality, and that's my truth.
Yeah.
So when we eat that, or we have an extra one, or we hoard some of them, and the response is we get in trouble, we get reprimanded, we get punished. Something that we don't want is to be told we can't go out and play, or to be told that we aren't allowed to hang out with those kids anymore, or we can't watch a show, or we don't get to use a toy, for example. So very early on, we learn this response to those things that aren't accepted, and we quickly start to put those into the hidden areas. First, it's often conscious if we're old enough to understand the difference between, if they find out, then it's going to be bad. And if they don't find out, then I get to enjoy it and no consequences. Like I can, like in the shadow of my pocket, I can hide some candy and then mom doesn't find out. So it could start very early. Of course, it can start much earlier with more emotional types of shadows. So if we, in an environment where we have to express ourselves, like, or a situation where we have to express ourselves, like I'm hungry, or I'm tired, or I'm angry, or I don't want that, I do want that, though the sounds that we make could become something that wouldn't be acceptable, the way we cry or the way we push or pull against the situation. So even seeing those really early memories as potentially where we begin to limit and deny and eventually create a shadow.
Yeah.
It can start pretty early, or it can be like later on when we start exploring the world and doing things and not doing things, and little by little those behaviors that aren't acceptable get shoved into the shadows, and we create a subconscious warehouse, you might say, of things that aren't believed to be okay.
Yeah, our own beliefs.
Our own beliefs, and that it will be supported by societal or familiar.
Exactly, based on the feedback that we're getting through it. You gave like an example that really hits home for me. For us, it was like always around food. Like our house was, we never had candy in the house. It was always like, you need to be on a diet all the time. And that built a pretty unhealthy relationship with it. And I think that, when you said that, it made me realize that it's not always the verbal reference that you get about it. Like, even if you see your mom or dad or sibling or somebody that you grew up next to, and they have a bad relationship with, so let's say food or drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, you like understand that that's something that shouldn't be done. Or so it's not always like a verbal understanding. It can also be what you see from the people that are around you, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we're sponges. Really, yeah, we're gathering all kinds of information all the time. So it's a perfect example. And yeah, like for me, I would say there were times in my life when it really wasn't okay to be playful and really like just sort of wild, because I grew up in a fairly spiritual environment with a set of expectations about what it means to be in center, center.
Samadhi.
Exactly. So even just going out and having a wild time, just doing some wild things that are kind of silly.
Loose.
Yeah, exactly. So I can see that there were times when I would question whether or not should I let my mom know, should I let my dad know that my intention is to actually go and have a beer or smoke a joint or something like that. That didn't happen that much, but it was very clear to me when those moments arose, would that be an acceptable thing? It could also be the judgment that comes from just a bigger philosophical view, because actually my parents didn't really punish me when, my dad asked me about drugs or something. I said, well, yeah, I've tried a few. He's like, okay, just be safe.
Yeah, I can't see Craig punishing without then.
No, but even just the culture, the idea of cleanliness and purity and all those things that I've been studying since I was able to comprehend, they were there. So it created these little shadows of ideas of what's right and what's wrong. And while it was true that it's not a great idea to get lost in drugs and things like that, even just having an external idea there created that little bit of a shadow from my life to say, okay, I don't want to be seen doing that. I don't want to be judged for doing that. So,
of course, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that because of religion.
Absolutely.
All of the sins and things and don't. And
around sexuality, around emotionality, around expressing and exchanging desires of things, all of it gets mixed in there. So getting back to the concept of shadow in a specific adult body and how we've learned in the world, I have a feeling that most of us are, we're here, we're living, we're engaging in the world enough that our shadow work is already being brought to us actually quite a bit in our daily life. If we're interacting with people and we have, relationships going on at pretty much at any level, then there's going to be the assistance from the greater good, you might say, the reflective nature of reality. So to reawaken or to bring light to those areas, we call them shadows. And what those shadows do over time, we're going to talk now about the result. Well, the result is usually a blockage or limitation.
And what does that mean?
This is where if we have a particular dharma or a path that's naturally there for us, but we limit ourselves or hold ourselves back from it, because in the shadows there might be a fear, there might be a judgment, there might be a certain outcome that we've projected onto it that we can't accept because we don't either deserve it or because we're not sure how to handle it. So blockages come in the form of ego, also in the form of belief about what I'm doing, if I'm right about something or if I'm wrong about something.
Or even separateness of ego,
Yeah, exactly. So this is, in yogic terms, we could call it there's asmita. So the kleshas are one of the models that we use.
We made an episode of it.
Exactly. So you can refer back to the kleshas to see what these are known as the obstacles or the hindrances, the blockages, you might say, that might come up along the human evolution. So blockages come in forms mostly in terms of resistance or attachment. So in the shadow work, we can look at them in terms of whether we're holding something back that we don't want people to see, or we're pushing away something that we don't want to acknowledge, from the outside.
What fear come into that?
Oh, usually it's the foundation for fear is the fundamental resistance to the nature of life, the nature of change, the nature of evolution. So fear comes in all these forms, either fear of loss of something, or
we attach it.
So we hold and attach to it as something that we don't want to let go of, like my perspective or my belief or my role in this.
Or my comfort zone.
For sure. Oh yeah. Comfort zones are big, huge part of this. Or a resistance, which is kind of the other side of the coin. Usually it's the same thing, but on the flip side, it's like, I don't want someone else's ideas. I don't want to feel the discomfort that particular thing represents. If I have to look at that, I might have to acknowledge where that original pain was in my life. And then, so there's a lot of negotiation happening in terms of
what comes up for me is like, I'm pushing away relationships because I had a bad experience and I fear that it will happen again. And like, I think that's a very common one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or even parts of relationships or types of relationships. So we can, even if we're in a relationship, we might be really pushing away a certain part of it because that represents another part of our shadow. And those definitely represent blocks in terms of intimacy, in terms of connection, in terms of letting consciousness fill our human experience, because that's really what a block represents, is a place where we don't have this natural ability or even understanding of how to bring light and how to allow that to flow through us. Light, when I say light, I mean just simply it's awareness, simply conscious acceptance of being. So another model that can really help is the kosha view of our human experience. When we look at what shadows are, would be in what's called the Vijnanamaya, which, sorry, that's not the shadow, but that's like the part that shows us there's a shadow. Vijnanamaya is the wisdom that shows us, oh, there's a shadow. And then what is that? Well, it means I'm blocking or pushing or resisting bringing light in. And where am I bringing light in? Into the Manomaya. The Manomaya is the mind and subconscious and all the stuff that we talked about from childhood and learned behaviors. And I'm talking about it from kind of a blend of Western and Eastern view, but they intersect here really a lot. So there's this whole process of slowly and humbly letting our world reflect to us what it is that I'm not able to hold in my own awareness myself. What haven't I looked at yet? And so this to me is a very humble path, like super, super humble. I mentioned this a few times because it means that now this is a heavy hitter for me, everyone's right. Meaning, not to say that I agree with what they're doing, but meaning that they are exactly as they need to be based on we did another podcast on, this concept of karma and like action and reaction, and everything is here because, so that person's doing it because there's a cause for them to do it. And in this path of unveiling these shadows, it's really helpful to see that everyone else that comes into our lives has that ability to bring light, to reflect light onto our unseen aspects. And they'll do it just by doing what they do, by being exactly who they are.
Yeah.
And if we rub up against it, or if we become really attracted and interested in it, or if we become somehow like really curious about it, or skeptical of it, or whatever response we have will help us to gain awareness of the shadow. And when I'm talking about shadow work, I'm talking about what we can do with it, which is bring light to it. So a blockage isn't a thing. We think of a block as like a fixed, stable thing that we have to get out of the way. It's the same thing as a boogie monster under the bed, like
Definitely.
It's in the shadow and it's pretty scary and it's a big deal until the light shows up.
And then you see there's basically nothing.
It's basically nothing.
It was imagined.
It's just imagined.
Exactly, the illusion, yeah.
Yeah, and so the reality that we live in is a decision. We live in this decision of whether or not I'm going to bring light to that thing. So the block is our decision-making process of, do I bring light or do I not bring light?
I think that like the block is there before we realize that it's even there. Like
Absolutely.
It's about when you know that you should be going in a certain direction or doing something particular or taking a certain move in your life, or maybe not taking a move, and you feel like you know that that's the right thing, but something's stopping you. Like there's a reason that you're not able to move forward with it. And I actually can totally relate. I'm dealing or managing with that right now in a professional aspect of my life. And I feel like in that space, it's important to mention that there is a difference though between like being aware of it and actually being able to let go of it.
Yeah.
Because I find that a lot of times, like, you're aware of the block, let's say it's fear, you're afraid. You might even know exactly what you're afraid of, and you might even know that it's irrational to be afraid of that, and like everything will be okay.
Yeah.
But I personally, I still am blocked by it. Like, it's still stopping me from doing that thing that I want to do. So how do we navigate that space from after we become aware of what that is and actually being able to move past it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. These moments where the understanding, the awareness, the intellectual information is all there to show us that we're stuck and that we're not moving forward. And then the who I will be without the block becomes a really important question. What is left if the block isn't there? Am I okay with that reality? Because who would I be is really an unsettling feeling for some of us if we haven't explored that level of power, that level of pure being. So if you just imagine, if we can do this together, if you just imagine, even for a few moments, what would be left behind had that block fallen away and had no place in your life for just even a few moments? How is it to be you? What's left there? Mm-hmm. And can you describe it in a few words? What's here, having that block actually fall off? We're just testing this. There's no big commitment needed, just for a few moments. Who are you without a limitation that looks like?
So if I'm asking myself, who am I without fear? I mean, it's an immediate answer of powerful, infinite, connected, just like my highest divine self. And I can tap into it immediately.
All right. Because it's your nature. You don't have to create that. It's perfect. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is really where the rubber meets the road. How long are you willing to stand in your truth? How long are you able to be here with that power? And the belief systems that we don't deserve to live in that have the most important role to play. Mm-hmm. So if we look at it in terms of there being someone kind of distracted, like we've distracted that little belief for a little while over here, mm-hmm. given it something else to do for a few moments while we just exist in our pure perfect being, then we can recognize that it's not a requirement that we live in limitation, of course, but it is a habit. That's the way I think about it. It's just a habit. There's nothing really substantial to it. You just showed us. Mm-hmm. There's nothing substantial. Having it not govern your understanding of self is just a choice. Although it's rooted in core beliefs. And that's where we look at the inner child. And we've done a podcast about inner child exploration.
Episode 1.
It's the fundamentals. Yeah. So
definitely. So
that's one approach. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the sort of freedom and the expansive infinite. This is the bliss body. This is the way that we experience our like full spectrum of out itself, is starting from that natural effulgence, that infinite being. And that can inform the rest of our layers if we allow it to. So the familiarity, it's like anything, even just like touching your toe into cool or warm water, that first exploration, which is what we just did together. You just explored, okay, what is it like right now? Even though I am blocked in my life, what would it feel like to not be blocked? Because you're going to stay in the situation for as long as you're not okay with being your whole self, which is what's on the other side of that in our mind. The other side of that decision or that situation is that experience of finally being myself completely. So that's really what the situation is mostly and usually about. It's not about that there's actually an obstacle other than the core belief that I don't deserve that other version of self. So how we approach it can be very simple in terms of, would you give a child help if you saw them experiencing that they aren't worthy of that natural freedom, that natural infinite, happiness or whatever was behind that that veil of the blockage. The body will change, and you can feel your body change if you tune in that moment. Like, who would I be without let's see what happens. Who would I be without the block? What happens?
I feel uplifted. No, I like feel like sitting taller, and yeah, for sure, I feel the difference.
The posture might even change.
Yeah.
Something available. Yeah, it fills from the inside. Even the muscles softening, the skin getting more beautiful and naturally.
Definitely.
So all those things are physically available to us to anchor and to take note of. And that will really help us establish a relationship to it.
I love that. And I feel like that's a wonderful way to approach it. Like, who would I be without that part or shadow? Another way that is possible to approach it is like, who do I want to be? Right? Choosing.
Yeah. And I have an immediate, I would say, response, like a coming up of, so this, what we're talking about being, is not something that we have to strive for. That's the only reason I question that approach. Because wanting is
Or who do I choose to be? Like, which part of us,
Yeah, we could say it as a choice.
Yeah.
And I understand in the phrasing, I'm looking at this, the want implies that it's not necessarily here already.
Yeah.
Maybe I want awareness, or I want to be able to know it
Right.
more directly. I understand what you're saying. But just to be clear about, there's nothing that we're here actually missing except for the reality. We're not seeing it.
Right.
So we're not actually missing anything.
Exactly. I know. I completely agree. That's a good adjustment there. For me, it's like about, you can choose to focus on the fear, or you can choose to focus on empowerment, or whatever you choose, or your natural ability or worthiness, or,
Yeah.
Hey, I'm quickly interrupting the episode to extend an invitation. If you are interested in deepening into any of the subjects we talk about on the podcast, we offer many different experiences on our beautiful grounds here in Baja, Mexico. From 9-day modules such as sound healing and yoga nidra, to breath and meditation, as well as 200 or 300-hour yoga teacher trainings, and many different shorter retreats. Check out our website, Yandara.com, to see all the information about the different experiences. Let's get back to the episode.
So the blockage, or the part when we feel stuck, is really valuable because it does have a purpose to help us survive and stay sort of on track with certain things in life. So it has functioned for us, and I don't want to disregard its function. But obviously it's not serving us anymore. So, we have a little bit of exploration, a little bit of curiosity that can arise. Like, what's the purpose now? Well, at this point, you're sitting here and you felt who you are without the blockage. But for some reason, the blockage will come back in as a familiar identity, you might say, like that. So we can think of it more like it has served us to maintain a sense of safety, or a sense of familiarity through a difficult, winding path until we have time and space and maybe an intention to look at the next version, the next possibility. So it's like a placeholder, and it's going to stay there. It's like on the screen, there's something called a screensaver. If you leave your monitor, that something just background running just happens. And so that is what comes when we're not present, when we're not actively engaging in this living, breathing, kind of dynamic thing.
It's a screensaver.
It's a screensaver, really. It's just a thing that functions to keep the screen, working. It doesn't necessarily offer any great benefit, or, ultimately, but it does have a function. So thanking it. So a few moments ago, you said, whatever we pay attention to, or whatever we put our, attention on, that is really important. Of course, what we feed grows stronger. So we want to focus on that a lot. We also don't want to miss or throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's a maturing that can happen if we approach what seems like a bad habit, or just like a familiar, normal state of being, of lack, or not quite enough of what I need to really make it, or however it feels. How does it feel? Like frustrating or annoying, or
It just feels scary.
the part about moving to the unknown, or the fact that there's a cycle of...
It's kind of like about growing.
Yeah. Okay.
So taking on more risk, being more visible,
Okay.
more responsibility.
Perfect. Okay. So on the flip side of having responsibility and being successful and fulfilling that responsibility is the what? If you don't fulfill your
Be
responsibilities...
safe, really. Like
Yeah.
the flip side for me is being safe.
Okay.
But
So let me
is it really safety? When when you're holding yourself back,
Mhm.
the rational mind can tell you no, but
Yeah.
the more like primitive side of myself
Right. Surviving.
feels that it's more safe.
Yeah. Exactly. And it is safer in some regard. And so if you play through that, taking more responsibility, being more visible, having more possibilities, that equals more potential for failure, more potential for not following through or fulfilling what expectations might be there if you are in that position that you're talking about of whatever that expanded view of yourself looks like. There's just more risk. So I think that's really important to honor, that there's a higher risk level at that. And if we draw time, from past into present, we can see that in the past, maybe risk wasn't something we could take without being hurt. As adults, we're usually fine in terms of if someone says, "Oh, you suck." Well,
Bruise, but
a bruise, but it doesn't really break us. Right? They're words. And as children, they matter a lot. They matter so much. But as adults, they can trigger us to feel like a child again.
right.
But actually, it doesn't really hurt us. And I'll give you an example. If I said, "Oh gosh, your hair is just so like, I don't know, it's just too blonde,
Too bright.
too bright." Yeah, or something like it's just too, yeah. Or if I said,
It's abuse in the workplace.
yeah, things that, what's something that you love about yourself that you really actually feel quite good? Like it's just like,
I like my hair.
yeah, exactly. So that's one of the reasons I can choose that, because if I say your hair is like ugly, okay,
It's gonna bounce off.
does it even really affect you? No, because you actually are quite good with your hair. Like there's no trigger that's hiding behind your hair that's actually going to surface.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we know that as adults, we're actually pretty good, unless we have a historical belief.
And then it hurts.
Then it hurts, exactly. And it's not because we've heard those words, it's because those words remind us that we actually believe that to be true, that my hair is ugly.
And it really takes us immediately back to that child response of how we reacted in the first place. And that's not only about a comment that somebody says or something, like about our hair or our looks or something like that. I find that for me, a trigger can be a tone of voice.
Right.
It can be like a certain interaction or a certain feeling that I have, which I find really interesting. Like in a minute, in 1 second, you're like, sure, back to that little child response that just doesn't know how to. I feel like in the moment you lose all of your training and all of the knowledge.
Perfect, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's so perfect. This is Devesha. Devesha is this unreasonable resistance or reaction or dislike or whatever to the situation of the person. We know it's unreasonable because usually we have to apologize later. We go back and we're like, I wasn't really, I'm sorry I blew up at you. I got a little, and that's a really good sign that we're being brought to something important. So learning the skill of honoring what's beneath that is really what the releasing or the dissolving of the blockage is. It's about bringing that to light. Okay, well, what is there? I don't want to throw the baby out with bathwater and just focus on I'm divine light and that's all that's here.
Right.
Because I want to have a solid foundation.
So not being it's called toxic positivity, right? Like not saying oh, I'm just going to be positive and think positive and everything will be okay.
Right. Yeah, we don't have to do that because We are integrated. We are light, dark. We're both, and we all, we want to honor that. It's a human experience. We are absolutely pure in essence. We're a spirit, but we're here to have a human experience as well, which is amazing. So these explorative shadow work kind of moments are really about taking that time to say, okay, you know what? Thank you. You just opened this potential for bringing light in to the shadow that I've been denying or ignoring or whatever, my life is covered up through my behavior, my busyness, my distractions. So here we are with that same intention of bringing light to the darkness that the child is surrounded by, which is the feeling of its hair. In that situation, you didn't have that, but somebody else, they may have cut their hair in a really weird way, or their hair was really not, the friends didn't like it, so they got made fun of in school. So what would you say? It's really simple. What would you say to a little kid if you walked in on them feeling really like ashamed of their hair? That would be something of a practice that you can apply at any time. So what is it? What do you say to that kid? What do you do for that kid who feels like their life is crumbling because people are laughing at them because of their hair? Mm-hmm. And that's all that's happening is our subconscious has brought to light this experience through inviting that interaction. And our subconscious is so smart, seeking balance. We talked about it. So my subconscious is actually trying to find the right people who I know at some level are going to say something or say it in a certain way that makes me feel that whatever it is. Yeah. So we're quite intelligent at that level of subconscious. We're seeking balance. So we don't have to think about it too much at first. We just live our lives. Let ourselves be moved. Let the engaging, attraction, whatever, repulsion, whatever, let them be there so that we can use them really wisely and look at what's beneath it. And usually it's a feeling that's like pure fear. Like, what's going to happen if I mess up? What's going to happen if I take on that position of being in the, out there? And, you being out there means like, hundreds of thousands of people might see you.
It's a lot of people.
So you never know, right? If you're putting yourself out there at that level, there could be ridicule, right? I'm just
probably will be. And so, like, at a certain level, like, it's a built-in.
Yeah. So how many of us can relate to, oh gosh, I don't want to, be in the public eye. I don't want to speak publicly in a situation because I might screw up.
And honestly, like, I think it even shows up in, like, I don't want to be in front of 10 people in a yoga class.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be thousands of people or even hundreds. Like,
yeah. Right.
It shows up everywhere. Like, I don't want to be ridiculed by my family. I don't want my friends to make fun of me or look at me different. Like, any business owner or any person that has like kind of an entrepreneurial role, which being a yoga teacher is, at a certain place, and also with the nature of how like society is built right now and social media and all of that, having a presence on social media is a must. I have most of my work is actually happening now online, and people are getting to know me through my online work, and it's just something that we have to do. And that's one of the biggest barriers for, let's say, starting yoga teachers or coaches or anybody in the space that needs to kind of put a message out there in order for people to just know what their message is and if they resonate with it or not, if they want to work with them or not, like in the most humble and service-oriented way. You still have to be on this platform, which is considered more of like a, superficial.
Yeah, it's different. Right, it's a medium, and a lot of us can relate to that. I'm sure if you're watching this podcast, you're probably part of the generation that sees that social media has the most powerful reach. It's really one of the most effective ways. And when I think about what that next step would be for a lot of us, it can be just visualizing. It can be running through the process and seeing what comes up and what do I actually have to confront. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to jump in with both feet and like put stuff out there immediately if you're feeling like that's way too much. Then just imagine it. The body's psychology turns into hormonal responses, and we don't even have to do it. So to practice this, you can just visualize it. You can just imagine it. You can say, okay, there's, I put my voice out there and no one comments on it. No one even says they like it. Okay, what comes up? Oh my God, I'm a failure. Wow, no one likes me. Oh gosh, maybe I don't fit in. Maybe I'm in the wrong place. So whatever phrase or feeling comes up, that's the shadow work starting. If we can get it down to that really basic feeling of what comes up in that moment, or maybe it's the other way around. It goes viral, but for the wrong reasons. So many people start talking about this silly, whatever girl who does this and she thinks that she, whatever, just imagine like worst case scenarios and just see what comes up. Okay. Oh my gosh, so many people are talking about me. That wasn't true. Like that's not what I meant. Whatever it is. And then there you can go back really directly to a feeling that was probably when we were in 4th grade, when we started to put ourselves out there and someone saw us do something with somebody and they thought it was something else and they spread it around the school and all of a sudden I have a crush on so-and-so.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
So what's the next step? And I also want to ask, like, before we go to the next step, how do you know when it's the shadow holding you back rather than you're just not ready?
Well, they go hand in hand. In one sense, of course, training and preparation and you could call it proficiency. Yeah, you want to be proficient at something to some degree that you can share with confidence. So I think some self-reflection and taking time to be humble enough to see, okay, maybe I don't need to do it the day after I learn it. I don't need to share the day after. It could be that I practice it for a week, a year, 10, whatever, a month or 2. So feedback is really important. Peer feedback. Looking to those who are in your same field and maybe a little bit further along. Maybe they've been teaching or doing this type of work for a few years longer. It's really, really important to have peers, to not feel like you're on an island. When people graduate from Yandara, for example, and they start teaching, they always, at least as far as I know, they always leave with a WhatsApp group where they can share their ideas. And
I'm still connected with the girls from the training 2 years ago.
Totally. Yeah, I'm in groups from 10 years ago. Incredible. So in those tight communities where your peers are really there to help you, I think those can be great opportunities to put it out there and say, hey guys, I'm thinking about broadcasting. I'm thinking about, sharing this. If you have a really safe relationship in terms of communication, then you can ask for feedback in a healthy way. Like, not about judging it, but to say, does this seem like the right timing? When I think about feedback, giving it is really difficult because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And if we ask for it, then we don't want to be hurt by someone not knowing how to give us feedback. So there's a lot of potentials there for checking with our peers to see whether or not we're ready to share that or ready to take that leap. And one of the ways, really simply, is if you're going to ask for feedback and you're not sure what you're going to get, you can always preface it by saying, what's your experience of listening to this? How does it feel for you to listen to this? And that's very different than, what do you think I should do? And I'll give you an example. If I show you my video, or let's say you show me your video, and I say to you, oh, I wouldn't do that. Okay, that lands a little differently than, I was confused for a few moments when you mentioned the ...
Yeah.
Okay, how does that land for you versus...
Definitely, for sure.
Right, it's a completely different thing. So getting this real-time feedback in a way that gives you an insight to their experience rather than eliciting shoulds and shouldn'ts upon yourself can help soften the blow, you might say, of getting constructive feedback. So I think it's really important to communicate from an experience rather than an advice like an idea that I know what you should do about it. I don't know what you should do about my experience.
Definitely. So instead of like asking what should I do, asking how was their experience with the whatever.
Yeah. What did you feel? What did you notice? What was difficult or what was helpful? And from that, they automatically support your growth rather than poke at your maybe.
Yeah, because no one knows what you should do.
Exactly.
But understanding how your work affects other people helps you take that knowledge in order to grow.
Perfect.
I love that. So let's get back to like, what do you do? Once the light is shining in and you realize, okay, I feel not good enough.
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
You can start with a letter to get a pen and paper, or start writing. I like pen and paper if you're going to be writing to a person from the past before digital media and everything. And just have a pencil and write a note to a person who at that age would have been quite impacted by that feeling. Because as adults, again, we're kind of good, even though there are parts of us that live in a very vulnerable age. That's why we have triggers. That's why we get excited, or we have reactions, because we're living as the vulnerable part of ourselves. Vulnerable in the sense of we are very strongly influenced by our environment. Whereas adults, we can kind of, she's having a tough day. I don't have to, it's not my thing, but she's having a tough day.
We have more of a seeing and understanding of the experience of another person.
Yeah, exactly. So when we were younger, we didn't have that. So sometimes we need clarifying messages to the part of ourselves that's still living in present time. So it's not about the past, but it is referenced through a memory, usually. And that's how we can access that part of our, what's called the Manomaya Kosha. We talked about that subconscious mind. So writing a letter, I think, would be a great way to start. Journaling about how that feels. That can be another way to bring light to the feeling. So rather than they shouldn't have done that, she shouldn't have, whatever it is, that feeling is coming up. What does it feel like?
Is there like let's go deeper into that, because I think that's a great tool. Is there like a prompt or a way someone should approach that journaling session?
It's a progression depending on how skilled you are at it. I would start with stream of consciousness. Like, let it be raw at first. As I mentioned a moment ago, like, steer away from the you shouldn't have, that jerk. But it depends.
That's not productive, no.
To be fair, it is important for some of us to have permission to share that.
Yeah, let it out.
Let it out. Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like, ultimately it's not going to help if I tell that person they're a jerk, but it does help for me to know it's possible to have that feeling that I'm mad at somebody. So we all have a different relationship to anger, which is the secondary emotion from fear. So fear is like the core experience. And then out of that, we get angry. If we don't want to feel the fear.
100%.
Yeah.
I just experienced that.
Wow. Okay.
I was like, I can just shortly share. I was with my mom and I felt that I was angry at her. And actually, maybe this is like a little oversharing, but
I'm stuck. Find good company.
Yeah. And then I ate a weed gummy. And it became like, in a moment, it became so clear that the anger was masquerading sadness about like something that I could see. And I was like, oh, I'm not actually mad. I'm just like trying not to feel the sadness.
Yeah, perfect. And the trying not to feel, that's called fear. I'm afraid to feel. I'm afraid to feel X, Y, Z. It doesn't matter. That's the fear that becomes the anger. So fear of feeling sad again, fear of feeling whatever it is. So that's a really pure way to look at, if I'm angry, let it be there, but know that it's not a real direct access point, even though it does give us something to pay attention to. And it's a flare-up of that internal condition of fear. It's not actually the way. It's not actually the way to continue, because it's an argument, rather than an accepting. So as soon as if we accept fear, we're already there. It's like, oh my God, I'm afraid to be hurt again. I'm afraid to be abandoned again. I'm afraid to be.
I think a good prompt would be like your classic question, what's beneath that?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm angry.
Yeah, but what's really beneath?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like your slogan.
What's beneath that? Tattooed on my back of my head. Yeah. So that's where the humility comes in as, thank you. You've brought me to that energy that I need to explore what's beneath that. So the writing about it, I'll go back to the writing. It can be very helpful to write down that process. There are models and prompts. One of them that I really like is from Byron Katie. She calls it the work. That's a model that's been really helpful to look at a frustration or like writing it down, like you should listen to me more, or you should respect me more. And then it unfolds from there to, how do I feel when I have that thought? Oh, I feel frustrated, kind of angry and whatever. And the next question is it true that I know what they should or shouldn't do? Can I know better than the great law of cause and effect? Can I know better than God, consciousness, how that person should be? No, I don't know. And then it goes deeper to say, well, if it feels like bad to have that thought, and I don't know what that person really should or shouldn't be doing, I don't actually know, can I see a reason to keep that thought?
Yeah.
Can I see a reason to stay in that angry, judgmental, sort of poking, blaming, projecting, victimizing? Can I see a reason to keep that thought that they should respect me more?
And also the thought of like growing is scary, or anything that's blocking us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So exactly. So we can turn it into, I should be better at this, or I should, those emotions that come along with looking at ourselves. I should be better at this. I should be out there more. I should be even though.
Yeah. Is that true?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Sure. Can I know that I should be different than I am, based on the law of infinite perfect causes and conditions? And when I say perfect, I don't mean that I like them, but I mean that they haven't failed to have a perfect result. So the law is perfect, not the activity. That's not ideal. I make a clear distinction between perfect and ideal.
Yeah.
So it's perfect. It's not ideal to me, but it's so. Then from the question of, can I know that it's true? That first statement, I'm left with this next question of who would I be without that thought? Like what would be here without that thought? And that's what I was touching on earlier when I asked you, who would you be without that block, you might call it. So another really powerful practice is playing with that. Who am I without it? Am I willing to be that person that I am without it? And what comes up when I approach that condition of freedom? Who am I? Is that okay? Can I be with that? That's how I like to play with that. Getting familiar with it. And then it goes even deeper to say, could it be as true, if not more true, when I reverse the you with a me? I should respect myself. I should respect myself. Or even replacing the I with you. Oh, I should respect you more. Could those even be as true, if not more true, actually, when I look at the way forward?
I love that. It's basically what you're saying is, first of all, giving ourselves that thing that we're missing, and also giving it outwards, because what we put out is what we receive.
It has to go through us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it.
We're an innocent bystander of giving love and acceptance and absolutely giving respect. Yeah, we benefit all the way through. So that is another practice that we can do, is this inquiry. It's called self-inquiry, inquiring into the experience with these questions and writing those down and really seeing them written out can help a lot.
Yeah.
So taking the time to write, I mentioned the writing to an inner child, like writing a message. And in school, when you used to write a note and like slap it, like write one of those. What would that little message say to that little girl who thinks that life isn't working out because she's not pretty enough, or because she's not doing it right, and she's not popular enough, and she hasn't been accepted into that group yet, or whatever it is? Like, what message would she receive from your heart if you could?
I love that. And you can put it on your mirror and like have that as a little reminder.
Totally.
It's like a message from your higher self.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's very simple, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
And then receiving the feelings that come when you're writing it. Because eventually you'll become better and better at formulating that sweet message. And once you get good at formulating that sweet message, then you can do it in the moment and actually direct that same heartfelt kindness to an imagined or a visualized little one in your field. If you had a girl, for example, that you wanted to give a hug, or you saw her in the room, that message will change everything if you sent it through your body, because you're the one that gets the result of it.
Yeah. And is it true that the more you connect to that knowing and that feeling of, let's say, our highest, most worthy and valuable self, the more you spend time there,
Absolutely.
the easier and more accessible it is?
Definitely. Yeah. It's like any path. When you walk it once, it's like weeds, and then after 2 or 3 times, you start to see that bit of path, and after a few more times, it's a trail. We're actually creating new neural pathways by allowing those thoughts to turn inward and take that time to shift. So, we have our work cut out for us. And life will present exactly what we need if we live it, if we show up for it, if we're present. Just let the person who cuts us off in traffic, or the partner who says that thing again, or says it in the way again, wow, what's beneath that? And we could be lost in the ego for a little while and say, I'm right, he shouldn't talk to me like that, and that you shouldn't do this.
And that doesn't mean it's not true.
No, exactly. It's not even about that.
Yeah.
Because, and in fact, the interaction from the triggered place is just going to create more problems.
Yeah. More bad karma.
More karma. Exactly. More distance from our truth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So taking time to go for a walk, if you get some frustration or triggered or something like that, can really help.
Take a breath.
Take a breath, at least one. I'd say 3.
Or 10.
Or 10, 15. Hold that technique back. Yeah.
An hour and a half.
Yeah.
Depends on what they said.
Yeah, exactly. Or how they said it.
Exactly how they said it.
And just, exactly.
The tone again.
Yeah. I told them. She promised she wouldn't.
No.
Yeah. So this is the humblest path that I've ever heard of, the path of yoga. So if we can recognize all things are one, and in the same way that removing a thorn from your foot, we are serving ourselves through all the people that come into our lives. So our right hand is the partner. Our right hand is the boss, or it is the world of social media, whatever it is. And our right hand shows up when we need it most to help us.
I want to kind of maybe just to wrap it up with kind of an optimistic note. I found that in my personal work, it really does help to do the internal, work, I guess. Like the more you
call it play.
Yeah, exactly. The internal play and exploration and bringing the light to the shadow, it really does make a difference in how you react and how you feel in your relationships and your interactions and your level of growth. And I mean, I really do feel the difference. So it's worth it.
I agree. It's amazing. It's magic. It's actually phenomenal how powerful. One drop of love in the right direction changes everything. And we can actually see that in our outer world. When a young person is having a hard time, if you give them a real moment of connection, a moment of presence, even the most innocent life, a moment of love, and things change almost immediately. And so I think that we can show up for ourselves in a really powerful way and let life teach us where we need to show up for ourselves. So we're not in the external flailing around trying to manipulate and fix and change other people and their situations, but we manifest that which is going to be stronger in our path, like helping us to grow. Yeah.
Really. Christopher, I love going deep with you on these topics and find it so interesting and so teaching. So thank you. And I also, it just came to me, but want to put a message out there to whoever's listening. If there's a topic or subject that you want me to drill Christopher about and go deep with him on, feel free to write either to me or Yandara or Christopher. It would be great. We're open to suggestions.
Definitely. And I want to add one more piece as we complete this topic of shadow work, is that the food that we eat, all the information that we take in, all the interactions that we have, they have a big part to play in whether or not we can direct the light of our awareness into the shadows. Because every time we honor our body, every time we honor our mind, we create a more wholesome landing environment for that light.
Yeah.
We give it a stronger place to flow through, a more clear channel. So
100%.
So leaving off some of the things that we know don't serve that clear channel of being helps a lot for the light to flow.
Definitely. I was just thinking about that. Just listening to a podcast like this and to an episode like this is already brings more awareness and more depth into this kind of work. So thank you for allowing this space.
Thank you. Such a pleasure. Yeah.
Now, after this time to nurture your mind and your spirit, we invite you to take a moment to consider others. A kind wish might come to mind. Know that what we learn becomes more valuable when we apply it and share it with others. So share this episode on Instagram stories, tag Yandara and I, or share with a loved one so that more people can benefit from it. Our hope is that the search will lead you home to who you already are, to what was always there. We'll be back next week with more inspiration, honest conversation, and insight into the energetic world around us. Thank you for listening and watching.